whenever terror strikes, there's always a scramble for information. There is pain, frustration, and everybody wants to get information as fast as they can. And the different sources for this information. But one of the key things that people ask is how many people have been killed. And I'm now joined by Tabitha Mwangi, who's a terrorism expert. And Tabitha, today we had the number of civilians that were killed from the president himself, who's the commander-in-chief, at 14. Though we had sources also indicating to us that the number could be much higher than what he announced. Just help us understand, why is there normally the issue of numbers? Why will the government give us that figure and we're hearing other figures? Why does that happen?
It is important to note that in a terrorist incident, numbers are very important for both the government and for the attackers. And so the government attempts to have the number, the government's desire is to have the number as low as possible, because then it shows the public that the government is on top of things. They know what they're doing. They have the proper machinery and human resources to deal with the incident as fast as possible. And so I would at first refrain from giving any figures until we get the official statements like the president did, because all this information that comes in has to be verified by the government. And so the most important thing is for the media and for the public to be patient and just wait for the actual numbers, because this is a situation that is evolving and changing all the time. We have people in hospital who are still getting treated, and you never know what will happen with them. So the numbers issue is quite contentious, but it's important that we wait for the government to give the official figures.
I mean, this is not the first time it has happened. We've had previous attacks, the El Ade, for example, and still numbers were never given. Up until now, we don't know how many soldiers we lost. So what does this mean then? Because we also had the terrorist outfit, Al-Shabaab, claim that they'd killed 47, but the government says 14. Why?
The terrorists want to give a higher number because it helps them feel like they're winning, and it helps their supporters to feel that what they're doing is actually working, and they also want the population to be very scared of what is happening. And that is why you find the terrorist numbers are always going to be higher. When it comes to the issue of waiting for the official numbers from the government, there's certain limitations as to how much the government can tell you, because this is an issue that touches on national security, and they do not want to give more information than is needed by than the public.
Let's talk about the terrorists. From the CCTV footage, we saw 4 terrorists walking around just next to Dusit Complex where we're standing. Why wouldn't the government give us the figures? How many terrorists were there? How many have been captured? How many have been killed?
That is very vital intelligence for the government, and until they're certain about what exactly happened, they should not give that number to the public, because it will let the terrorists know how much the government knows. So for instance, let's say in a hypothetical situation, there's 10 terrorists and we know maybe 6 have been arrested and maybe 1 was killed. We need to know where the other 3 are as the security people, so that we can be able to know how much information we should expect to get from them. Because remember, after we rescue the people, we have to carry out investigations to know who was behind what. And in most cases, the desirable outcome is to get these people alive, but it doesn't always go that way. So until you get the situation completely under control and you get the information that you need, it is always difficult for the government to give too much information.
Well, Tabitha, up until the moment when there was when the announcement was made that the operation now is over, and there were statements that were just issued right here from the CS Fred Matiang'i and the other people involved in this rescue operation and in this mission, our reporters were still saying that the people who are still being evacuated, and we were getting all those reports that it's not yet over. Why then not give a proper and give a correct figure of how many people have been evacuated, how many people have been injured, for example?
Just like I said, this all has to do with the narrative. Depending on where on how much the government knows, they do not want to give so much information that one will cause panic amongst the population, to any information that will let the terrorists know what the government already knows. Therefore, the issue of how many people have been evacuated, how many people have been taken to which hospital, which terrorist is being held where, is very sensitive information, because remember, terrorists don't want 1 million people dead. They just want 1 million people watching on TV after they wreak havoc. And so the numbers will always differ depending on the time, and as days go by, we're going to get a more clear picture of how many people were actually killed, how many people were taken to which hospitals. So it's an ongoing process, and the most important thing is to know that with law enforcement agencies on the ground and doing their work round the clock to make sure that everybody is safe, we should just be a bit more patient and let them give us the information when they're ready.
But again, Tabitha, don't you think the government has a duty and a responsibility to its citizens to keep them informed and tell the truth? Because you have families that are in panic already. The people who are still missing. We had so many people coming here. There were families milling around this place wanting to know the truth. How many people are still there? They can't reach them on phone. So don't you think, again, this is a disservice to citizens?
I would not call it a disservice. I would just say it's a very difficult act to balance. So in counterterrorism, we have numerous dilemmas that people dealing with the incidents have to deal with. So in this case, they will rather withhold that information until it has been verified to make sure there's not excessive panic amongst the population, until they're certain that these are the right numbers and this is the right information that we have. Because remember, in today's information age where everybody with a smartphone can tweet anything, can share any video, the government has to be very careful how they sell the narrative to the public. It doesn't come from a point of them wanting to withhold the information because they're being malicious, but it's looking out for the best interests of the country in terms of security, building the economy, and making sure that there's stability amongst the population.
Well, I mean, was there prior intelligence that this attack was going to happen?
We still can't be certain, because what happens in today's world with all this information coming in from the different partners that states deal with, cooperate with in terms of gathering information and intelligence, you get a lot of intel which might be useful, which might also not be useful. And so it is very difficult for people to analyze that intelligence and be certain that this was something that was coming. So until they sit back and look at all the noise that they get to hear all the time, they have to sift through that and then let us know that maybe there was a tip here and there that if we added 1 + 2, we would have found a certain figure that would make sense for us to have been able to thwart this. But remember, this is something that is ongoing all the time. People are making calls all the time. There's encrypted social media channels where people can communicate, and sometimes this information does not get to the right people on time for them to analyze it and use it to make something useful that is used by the security agencies.
I mean, let's look at the rules of engagement. We had civilians, you know, who are the first responders when the attack happened. And immediately after, we saw uniformed officers with the Reke company going in, the GC officers going in. And for some time, all of them were working together. What are the rules of engagement when it comes to a terrorist attack and you have that kind of situation?
The most important thing is to establish a central command structure. So instructions are coming from a central point, and everybody involved in the rescue mission gets to listen to those people, because there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of people in pain. There's people sending all these messages. So the most important thing is for the civilians who have volunteered to help rescue people, and any police officers on the ground, anybody who can help, to help, but within the command structure.
I mean, talking about the command structure, that is clear for the security agencies that are coming to respond to the attack. But then we have the civilians. Who do they listen to? Who do they follow? Because we saw some of them here carrying guns and walking around carrying guns, some in sleepers. Who do they follow then?
The most important thing is for everybody, including the civilians, to listen to the police. Because the police and whoever is in charge of the command structure that we've already mentioned is the central point of disseminating instructions, knows more than the other people on the ground. And so when everybody listens to one source of instructions, and it becomes a huge team of people working together to get the desired outcomes, which is save as many people as possible, and if possible also get the terrorists alive so that we can use them to get information.
I mean, there's been conversation, and from when Westgate happened and now this attack that happened yesterday, sentiments that have been echoed by COTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli that I think it's the right time to arm private security firms. As a terrorism expert, do you think that's the direction perhaps you need to take?
That's a difficult thing to answer with a yes or no question. I think the most important thing would be to make sure that even as we arm more private security companies and even citizens, we have the right structures in place to make sure that, one, everybody getting a gun is of sound mind, just like the Constitution, the law dictates. Everybody getting these guns knows how to use them. We practice safety gun handling so that we do not have an incident like in the United States where there's so many people with guns walking around saying the good guys are going to help deal with the bad guys, and then sometimes even those we think are good guys end up doing more harm than good. So it's important to know, yes, if we're going to arm more people, these are the rules, these are the checks and balances that we will have in place, and that will not be corrupted by anyone, to make sure that only the right people, and there's a very good database showing that so and so has a gun, these are the number of bullets they're allowed to have, because there's different kinds of guns. You can't go arming civilians with just any kind of a gun, because they might not need a very advanced gun for their safety. So it's very important as we come up with these policies, we really think about them. We look at other countries that are doing well, because we have cases of countries that have a lot of civilians with guns, but they're still able to maintain sanity in terms of gun safety. So we have to sit down as a nation and think, are we doing this because the government is not able to do it? Are we doing this because we actually think we're capable of doing it in a responsible way? So it will not, I wouldn't say either yes or no. I will have to first of all sit down and look at the pros and cons of everything.
I mean, Brenda Wanga did a story about the anatomy of basically what happened. We're standing next to the road that they used going in, because it's only one entry here, going to the Dusit complex. As an expert, take us through what is going on through the mind of the assailants when they're going in to carry out this attack. And do you think in your analysis something went wrong?
So it's important to note that before any attack happens, they have prior intelligence collected about the place that they want to attack. So this is not a random thing. They do not just wake up one day and decide, okay, let's go attack a certain mall, let's go attack a certain hotel. So if I was a terrorist getting into here, I would need to know where the security lapse is. How many security guards do I expect to find at the entrance? What kind of checks do they do? What should I be expected to give? Do I just give a national ID, or do I give something else before I can be allowed to get into the building? If I'm getting into that building, from where I park my car to where the building to where the entrance of the building is, how far do I have to run? So they have to do all these calculations before they can actually go do the attack. And in most cases, you find that if there is installation of smart technologies, for instance, smart CCTVs, you can be able to see there's a person that comes to this place very often. They seem like they're just collecting information. They just come at a certain time of the day. They check how many people are in which restaurants. And so it's important to know that this is not something isolated. This is not something random. The government and all security agencies need to sit down and think, if we're going to secure our malls, our hospitals, our schools, our media houses, because there's been attacks on different media houses in the world, how best do we do it, and how do citizens communicate this intelligence to the relevant authorities? Because somebody knows something before it actually happens.
Back to our conversation that we're having here at the 14 Riverside Drive, and Tabitha, you have witnessed a number of attacks, not just in Kenya, but you've monitored closely what's happening globally. Are you seeing a change of tact in how they're carrying out these attacks?
Over the years, there's been a lot of changes in how terrorist organizations plan and carry out their attacks. They have been forced to make changes to, one, survive in a social media dominated environment. They've been forced to change tactic whenever law enforcement agencies have caught up with them. And when it comes to Kenya specifically, there's been a lot of changes in how the attacks have happened. But the most important thing to note is the change in which the public, the government and the media has portrayed in the event of these unfortunate events.
What in your opinion is different?
One, there's more sensitivity on what should be told to the public and what should not be told. There's also a change in how the government communicates to the public. So this time the government made sure that they clarified on which phone numbers should be used. They made sure everybody knew which social media platforms they will be using to communicate. They have withheld information that might not be very useful in public domain at this point, unlike in the past where they were saying things and then later coming back and changing their own statements. So there's been a lot of change in that, and even how Kenyans have reacted to this. Kenyans were out on social media encouraging the people donating blood, talking to people about not sharing certain kinds of images. So there's a change in how Kenyans are doing it. And I think this means that we are learning from the mistakes we've made in the past, which is a very good thing.
I mean, Tabitha, let's look at the element of time. How critical is this in the fight against terrorism? I mean, we saw Westgate, it went on for days, and the longer it was taking for the mission to be completed, there are so many issues that were arising. I mean, there was so much information that was coming through. And this one, from Kennedy Mureithe's story, the Commander-in-Chief obviously didn't want this to be prolonged, and somebody had to make that final call and that executive order for this to end. How critical is time?
Time is very important because it determines how many people will be rescued, whether we really want to have the attackers come out alive, or we're just going in to make sure that we do not negotiate with them. We're going to use force to neutralize them and, sort of move on with life. But I think the most important thing is for people to know that as much as time is important, you would rather save more lives by taking slightly longer than rushing in to make decisions that have not been well thought out, have not been well calculated, that end up causing more lives to be lost, or not getting as much intelligence from the attackers as we would want to do.
Tell us, why would the terrorists keep people hostage for hours? Obviously, when they walk in this place, they know there's no way they're going to come out because it's only one entry and one exit.
Yeah.
So they're prepared to die.
Yeah.
Why prolong it? Why take time holding people? Because it's psychologically affecting them, but they don't care, obviously. But why is time so important for the terrorists?
The time is important for them because, remember, for them, this is all a theater, this is all drama, this is all intriguing for them. They want to keep us in suspense for as long as possible because that is winning them more hearts amongst their supporters by showing that, oh, we can hold the government hostage for 48 hours. We can actually keep a country in a standstill for as long as we want. And so for them, the longer they take, the better it is. But for law enforcement agencies, the most important thing is to save lives, because that is why the government is there, to make sure that as many civilians and law enforcement agencies come out of this alive. So it has to be a very delicate balance between the government's interest in saving as many people as possible and not making terrorists get away with holding us hostage for too long. Because remember, for them, they want the publicity. If they just come in here and everything is done in 15 minutes, we move on to other things. Other things will be trending on social media. Other things will be making everybody talk. We'll forget about it, but they want to hold us hostage for as long as possible so that they can get to show that they're capable of gaining their political gains, making their political gains.
I mean, in this incident, do you think they got it?
I would say no, because if 700 people were rescued, were evacuated successfully within a very short time, then I will say they were not able to hold us hostage for as long as they would have wanted, because we did not hear cases where they were asking for ransoms. We did not hear of them. Well, we might get to hear about it much later because this is still a very delicate issue. There will be changes as time goes by. But I do not think they succeeded because, one, the security agencies and the EMS people were here very fast to provide security and emergency services to people, and information was trickling in about what was happening. So I do not think they held us hostage for as long as they would have wanted. Given the numbers that they were probably targeting and what they were able to get, I think they lost.
You've just touched on the response, and we're going to go into that on this issue of what happened. Let's look at the response time and the lessons that we've learned from the time we had the Westgate attack, and then which is just not very far from where we are, and now the incident that took place here yesterday.
One, this time the emergency medical services providers were able to get here much faster. Law enforcement agencies were able to neutralize the attackers much faster. We have not been held hostage for as long as the other attack at Westgate took. Something else is the response from the public and the way the media has covered it. It's been completely different, which shows that as a country we're growing, learning, and the next time this happens, God forbid, then we will be much better prepared, because this is a learning process. There's no country that's yet to get it like 100%. So it shows that Kenyans have learned from the mistakes that we made at Westgate, and that is very commendable for not only the government but also the media and the public.
Well, thank you very much, Tabitha, from the Center of International Security Affairs.